GT Holidays, South India's #1 travel brand.
GUVI, a vernacular edutech brand, skilling everyone everywhere.
Mr. Sab John Edathattil, pleasure to have you with us on Galata Plus. Of course, we've talked earlier about Guna. This is the strange interview for me because usually I know why I am sitting in front of somebody. It's either to promote a movie or to, during the promotions or to analyze the film after the movie has been released. But this is a time where you said, let's do an interview. And I said, yes. What are we doing this? What are we talking about?
First of all, this is a conversation. I never meant it to be an interview,
Yeah.
but at the same time, this is a conversation. And
Yeah.
we haven't talked or met with each other for a long
Long time. Yeah.
So that's one major thing for it. And second thing I realized is I was actually thrilled by the developments of the recent developments or unexpected developments that happened out of a movie called Manjummel Boys, which had a great impact on Guna. Guna was written and produced in 1991, which was somewhere around 33 years ago. And there is a song that works in this movie, and suddenly you realize that it's not because of the song or anything, but at the same time, Manjummel Boys was catching up like wildfire at some point.
But why do you say it's not because of the song? The song is a huge part of the movie, right?
But I realized that the song may not be the entire reason. This is what I personally feel. Song had its flavor and great impact on the film. But at the same time, the movie wouldn't have stood had it not have the kind of identity that it bears as an underdog turning to a hero.
This you're talking about
Manjummel Boys.
Manjummel Boys. Okay.
The same is the case with Guna.
Right.
An underdog turns to the audience to be a hero.
Yeah.
Maybe I have my interpretations about that character called Suju. That's a different thing. Now that I'm seeing the movie, Suju is an underdog.
The Sobin Shahid character.
And after having done something beyond his capacities, he wanted to hush it up and say that, don't tell this to anyone and let's keep it a secret. This actually is the point which I connect with that film. The savior part of it, where Guna song comes up, that emotionally triggers into something. Yes, of course. But at the same time, you carry this movie home. Probably you would have heard the song a lot before. But when it's placed in a context like this, and then the song is been re-rendered or resung at that moment, it gives another flavor of emotion, a platter which is absolutely different. And the interpretation of a platonic love in place for an obsessive love worked, which was a surprise for me.
Right.
So it maybe have a combo of an emotional flavor or a refurbishment or a kind of a bouquet. Other than the movie itself, had the movie itself stood on its own pillars, maybe it wouldn't have worked, is what I mean. The song, of course, had its flavor, but the movie also has its own grounds of
That is Manjummel Boys.
Manjummel Boys. Some reckless boys come there and they fight with each other. And when it comes to one of their friends missing and they don't know how deep it is, and they assess how deep it is, and they realize the dangers or the improbabilities or probably impossibilities of getting their friend's body back. And there comes a guy who says, well, I'll go down and try. This worked. And how difficult it is to gauge the depth and fathom. I am not saying it fathom like a sea, but at the same time they say it's a 3,000 feet down there. And he himself couldn't have come back. So that actually, the survival instincts actually made a lot of difference. But in Guna, it was not a survival instinct. It was about the interpretation of a love, an obsessive love or an ardent possessive unconditionality of love, which worked.
I know you're the writer of
course,
Guna,
of course,
but
you say.
my take on that is, because I do consider that you're the creator, but as somebody who consumed the art, I have a valid interpretation and mine is as valid as yours. But what I thought of it is there is a survival instinct in Guna as well, because this is a man who sees himself as being unclean, and the only way he can survive, so to speak, is by cleansing himself
Correct.
of the dirt that he sees around him. Dirt is both the actual physical dirt and the metaphorical dirt of his mother running a brothel and
Yes.
things like that and all
Yes.
that. So he wants to cleanse himself. So he's waiting for this mythical figure called Abhirami to come and cleanse him. And of course, he finds her in by accident, assumes that she's the Abhirami and all that. But that is a kind of survival instinct, right?
Yeah, that's true. Even as a writer, I wanted Guna to survive.
Yeah.
But his jump in the end is, I would say, to support that survival or his own perish. That was actually made that way. It was purposeful in a way. I don't know how it will transpire in today's times, maybe to think of a story on that, or as I had a sequel in mind, but at the same time, it was not possible at that time, or how to make the sequel was again a big issue at that time. But now I realize there is some kind of a allegiance and loyalty to this character called Guna.
Right.
And I believe Guna will survive many more years. Why? Because I still, again, coming from what you said, and maybe my interpretation at that time, as a writer 33 years before I found the moment of realizing this story, that was a moment, that was a couple of hours. So that, I say, is where you get a trigger or a muse which is driven by your own catastrophe or your own sadness or agony or anguish. You write something. You don't have any logic while you write it. Those 2 hours were just writing out from your heart. So when you write from your heart, you are trying to interpret your agony, trying to interpret probably your hope and anticipation about your own life as a writer. And then through the writings, you are trying to inculcate something. Probably it will work. You were trying to make a meaning out of it. But that meaning was not at that moment with me.
Right. But just to think, I was not trying to make the meaning of it. This is the meaning I got from it.
Got from it.
Yeah. Yeah.
That depends on a mindset that you have.
Yeah.
From my mindset, all I wanted to define for myself is what is this unconditionality of love.
Yeah.
Every moment of love is being judged by a precondition or a condition. So who does give that unconditional love? Then I wanted to exaggerate it maybe at that point, and that all these humans would have conditions. And of course, a human with an aberrated mind, not an unaberrated, aberrated mind can only give this unconditionality. So I was trying to compare the frivolous egotism of a human being with the generosity of an aberrated mind. This is what I was trying to compare. That's why eventually I wrote, maybe you won't understand this, but this is something you cannot understand, which came out as that perennial statement, the romantic statement which Balakumaran wrote, "Idu manidar unarnu kolga." So you may not understand it. So this is how this will survive even now.
That word itself has a kind of survival in it, that phrase itself, because adayum tandi.
Adayam Tandi.
That's like, it goes beyond.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So the interpretations will grow, but the writer's mindset is at that moment is to bring something from his heart.
Yeah. Or is unconscious. Yeah.
Absolutely. So the subconscious, that's what I'm always trying to say. Every writer should have that, the awareness. Probably you call it that awareness is a spatio-temporal conditioning of mind. You have the space, you have the time, and then you interpret something within the limited resources that we have or the scarce means that you have. You write something. Probably you have the limitation of time that you need to present this story after 3 hours or 4 hours or 5 hours. Then you have the space or limitation of time And that actually triggers the writer into something. You cannot define that. This is something which I don't think I can define it at all.
Yeah.
So a creation is something that comes from one's heart at that moment with a spatio-temporal awareness based on the subconscious of that person, which comes out as a baggage that he has lived through his life.
Yeah.
Then you get some kind of an identity beyond your imagination.
Yes. And to add to that, just like your baggage, your emotional baggage is making you write this, my emotional baggage is making me respond to this in a particular way.
Correct.
Had I been a different person,
Correct.
I might have responded to Guna a different way.
Correct.
The person sitting to the right of me may have different emotional baggage and they'll respond to it a different way.
Correct.
So which is why that becomes so fascinating, because which is why I don't like the term itself, whether something is a good film or a bad film, because you can only say what your reaction to a
Yes,
film was,
yes, Baradwaj.
because it is such a malleable thing.
To add to it, I always tell in my classrooms or to my aspiring writers, I always say there are 3 C's I believe in. Never compare, never criticize, and never complain.
Okay.
So these 3 things C's are actually some basis of writing, because when you write something, you are a critic. But at the same time, you have the value of looking at it from your viewpoint or representing an audience viewpoint,
Yeah.
which may not be the writers at that point. So you interpret. So you have to keep that open. And when you try to say that, oh, if I write this, a critic will say something about this, then the creation doesn't happen.
Yeah.
So you need to go by it. And my baggage will interact with your baggage. And that makes the creative process grow
Yeah.
from the writer to the audience.
Yes, but otherwise it is not communication, right?
Absolutely.
Because if you don't give me something and I don't receive it with a certain amount of empathy or understanding or whatever, then there's no communication.
Absolutely.
We're not talking.
And this is called, it is, there is a word for it, I don't get that correct word, it is a psychological term. Sometimes I'll get it later. This is something like when you write, there is a black spot on a pineapple piece.
Okay.
I write it. Now, when I write that, what do you think? You cannot define the black spot that I have in mind, but I have written a black spot. So the director who reads it will have another black spot in his mind. And when he makes it into a film, the audience will have another black spot which is away from what the writer thought or the. So this actually is a communication issue, which is called another name. I'll come back to that name later, but I forgot that. So anyway, so this is the writer's dilemma basically. This is where I believe when you have a thought, you try to write it down on paper, you have insufficient words to communicate on paper. Sometimes you call it a writer's block sometimes, because you wait for hours and hours to get the right word to communicate what you have in mind,
Yeah.
and you lose your patience. So this is something which we need to address at some point of time when you write a script, and then that's been made. If you are not present at the sets, you just sell the script, and then some people read it and they make it, and probably it varies. So that's not a complaint. So what I'm saying is these things exist between the writer and the filmmaker. Sometimes the writer would have something and the filmmaker would have something else, and that would have taken a good shape than what the writer thought.
Yeah.
All this happens.
So I'm very curious about, okay, don't compare, I understand, of your 3 C's, because when I'm writing something, I should not immediately start comparing, otherwise I'll never get forward, because everything is probably done earlier and we can only find newer ways of doing the same old things. But what is don't criticize? Should I not be self-critical while writing?
No, what I'm saying is the writer shouldn't be critical. So the writer say that what he wrote was wrong when you write it, and then there is something critical about you trying to accept the critical nature of what you have written.
This is the post film's release. Okay. But while you're writing itself, you are critical.
You are critical.
Yeah.
And then somebody criticizes it, and then you don't have any say on that because that is another output of what you have written.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you should accept it. And don't complain because I would have done this bit better had I got this.
Yeah.
After the movie, you come in front of the scene and say that scene would have been better, but I didn't have that means to do that, or else it could have been better. You don't have it.
Yeah.
So this is gone. So that's why sometimes we say that cinema becomes unpredictable, is because of these elements which will add to its unpredictability.
Right.
That is beyond your control.
Yeah.
And certain things, as I told you, Robert Frost said, I never thought of any of these. And you create these tons and tons of positive criticism, positive sides of it. I may not have thought about it.
The way I look at it as a critic is, this is fascinating because a creator and a critic are having a conversation.
Yes, I
but
love it.
I see you in front of me,
Yeah.
right? You are the only person who probably knows the true you, right? I'm seeing the part of you that shows itself to me. This part of me is very knowledgeable about cinema, loves to talk about cinema, seems to be a kind person, seems to be something else, whatever. So these are some observations that I've put together, and because they overlap so much with my own values, when you ask for an interview, I don't even say, what are we going to talk about? I just say yes, because
Absolutely.
that is like a
I
thing.
loved it, yeah.
But the point is that even with a work of art, it is impossible to truly know its meaning, because I would argue that even the creator does not know the full meaning of that work of art, because so much of it is coming from somewhere deep within. They may set out to tell one story, so the one line is there, or the whatever it is, but as they go deeper and deeper and deeper and think, it may become something very different from what they set out to tell.
Yeah, Baradwaj, you have a very, I would say, you have just now spoken a very important point of screenplays and screenwriting. Why I say this is, when you say I'm writing a story, that story doesn't exist without life.
Without
Life.
Real life?
Human life. The story won't exist. It won't interpret anything, or it won't have any meaning unless you compare it with, or you have a context of life. Whether you are making a fantasy, or you make an animated film, or even for that matter, a game. What makes this writing complex? You are saying that you cannot make a one line and then try to follow it up. What makes that process complex is not because the writing is complex, the life is complex. That makes the stories exist. That actually is the value of life. You were earlier in our talking, you were talking about the cleansing. We all want to cleanse something within you and me. So what I'm saying is, why we go to stories and why we watch movies, it is not because it triggers you, an actor is out there, or you have excellent, spectacular things out there. That will vanish within 1 minute of watching the film. The desert will vanish within 1 minute. The car chase will vanish within 1 minute. But what is inside the story is what will trigger you to stay.
What if I argue by saying that sometimes that temporary thrill of the car chase is what I want?
Yeah.
I'm a very casual viewer. I'm going there. I just want to munch my popcorn and watch a car chase. And I don't even care if I remember it or not. I'm just going to come back and...
It is like you seeing a man walking 5 kilometers.
A car chase?
A car chase.
Okay.
It's same. Suppose if you see the car chasing, there has to be some element of engagement in there. That's what you call the story part of it.
Right.
There has to be conflict in there. There has to be some kind of engagement, is nothing but the hook of hope or fear.
You mean I should care about the persons in the car chase?
The person in the car chase, or the car may get toppled over, may get into an accident when they take that swift turn, or I just want this car to win.
Okay.
So absolutely all kind of story engagement boils down to just 2 points: hope and fear. If you don't have any of these, you get bored.
You mean as an audience,
As an audience.
Okay.
As an audience, and of course, the writer also should know about it.
Right.
Because the writers, what is the writer's value? The writer wants 1,000,000 people to clap at it, not just 2 or 3. So when you want 1,000,000 people then to clap what you have written or congratulate you for what you have written, you need to have an element of universality in it. And that universality is nothing but the human element.
Right. So let us take Guna and Manjummel Boys. What is the hope value in both these movies, and what is the fear value in both these movies?
In Guna, the fear value is whether this Guna is going to survive and the unconditionality will exist. That actually is the ultimate hope. Maybe you have moral actions to support it. So when the girl is hit, he looks at this girl, which he never, Abhirami can never leave him. That again is a moment of hope and a moment of fear for the audiences. Then he says and he speaks and says that, what did you do to my Abhirami? Then he carries her and he jumps, saying all that statements of things. For Manjummel Boys, he has actually saved him. So even in saving, he is a person, probably it could have highlighted a little bit before, but at the same time, we can know that this man cannot alone do that. Or is the rope going to break at some point? Or can he carry this guy? Because when you see how he lay on that rock, it's like a vegetable, all crumbled and broken. And then he tries to hug. These are all moments of fear because we all want him to survive. And he comes up. And then he is taken to this, wherever it is, the underdog, finally, the hope that comes to us is the underdog gets the recognition.
Right.
Of heroism. So in both these movies, it is played well. Whether it is communicated well, I think to a certain level, it is communicated well. But at the same time, both in Guna and Manjummel Boys, this hope and fear plays.
Right. But wouldn't you say that, at least for a first-time viewer, when you see Guna, you have no idea where the story is going, because it is a very strange, bizarre, unique story. Because it's a very strange story. It's not your love story. It is not anything. It's like you've never seen something like it as a story-wise. I'm not saying this just because you're sitting in front of me. So when I'm seeing the first, like, say, half an hour of the film, all I'm thinking of is this man wants to cleanse himself. That is the overriding theme of this. And he's rejecting that one girl who likes him in the brothel simply because she's also dirty. Because she also belongs to that same breed of people who sell their bodies to other people, right? So I'm wondering, what is going to happen next? Is he going to find another thing? So for me, one of the most beautiful stretches is how he gets to Abhirami. They plan a robbery. This guy is an expert in picking locks. That robbery goes spectacularly wrong. And in the meantime, there is this temple diversion, and there is that kind of a sign in a temple that points towards her, which he misinterprets as this is destiny pointing me to her, and all the time. I would have never guessed any of this. In Manjummel Boys, on the other hand, simply because it is a well-known genre by now called the survival thriller, you know the survival will happen. There is only one thing that can happen. This man has fallen down, he has to come up.
And we expect him to come up somewhere or the other.
So there is so I'm saying, I don't know if I'm feeling the same hope and fear here.
That is true in a way, but the intensity of hope and fear is less.
Okay.
Of course, I can say that. That's because probably I'm not finding fault with anyone here, but at the same time, I feel Guna came to the shoot level after about 20 rewrites. This wouldn't have come up with that kind of rewrites.
Okay.
This is my frank opinion about it. I'm not finding fault with it.
No.
New generation writers think that the first draft is the draft.
Okay.
That's where everything starts. Of late, someone was telling me, I haven't seen that video, Vidhu Vinod Chopra's the 12th fail. He was showing in the video, these are the drafts that I have made. That was some odd 100 drafts. All writing is rewriting, including your fate. It can be rewritten. But the point here is, when you believe and when you see rewriting as a kind of writing, you start loving it. Because every rewrite will get you to something else. And your theme is defined and redefined. So the first draft may have a theme. When you write the 15th draft, you may have an absolutely varied theme. The roundedness of the character will set in after so many rewrites. So probably that could be the impact of this, that the result of not being rewritten much about it. At the same time, they have tried the survival. Of course, we know that he is going to survive, but more than that, the story doesn't end there. The story, that's what I'm saying. Siju would have been exploited or worked or rounded well. I'm only critically, not critically saying. This is just a suggestion of what I felt when I was watching the film. Because Siju's underdogishness had to be projected a little bit. Because it ends with his heroism, or his truth about life, or his true perspective is been recognized by people. So that's his success.
Yeah. There's another thing where I think we are in an age where it helps to oversell all your emotions. One of the things that I noticed about Manjummel Boys, and again, I'm very, very happy that it succeeded.
Yes,
and
yes,
like,
yes.
like
Me,
full
I
credit to
also-
that. This is just an academic
Yeah, absolutely
discussion.
academic
So
discussion. This
there's
is only
no
that
thing, right?
They have done a great job, of course.
So you start with this place of high, cross-cutting where this is happening, that is happening, something else is happening, something else is happening. People are rushing to a church and this and that and all that and kind of a thing. Whereas when I see something like I'm violating one of your C's and saying don't compare, but I'm comparing. When I
Yeah.
see a Kumbalangi Nights, the movie breathes. The characters breathe. I breathe.
Yeah.
I'm in this sea of humanity that is being created on screen. I'm within that. In Manjummel Boys, I'm always on the outside looking inside. And again, this is a very personal opinion because
Yes.
for almost everybody else, his movies work very, very well, right? So, how would you explain that?
See, again, I tell you, this is, there is something called the mass viewing psychology. It is out there. I believe in that.
Yeah.
When you are in a theater, when the masses are there and you are part of that in theater, that actually influences you. That is part of a human nature, basically. But at the same time, when it comes to this outside the character or the world, I think it is, if at all you experience that, I would say it is a mistake of the script. A mistake of the script. We should accept that. The reason is, no script will allow the viewer to come out of it. Only it can draw the audience into it. So there is a hysteric mass around you. Apart from that, the influence is there. Apart from that, the script also should pull you in. That pulling you in has to have character dimensions or the dimensions of the world. The spatial dimension of the world is clearly defined here. Even Guna Cave, when they recreated or the movie portrayed Guna Cave, it found the depth which is highly dangerous.
Yeah.
And you could redefine the spatial properties of that space, the world. That was not in Guna, because that was not intended. We only had the space which is for the living and some kind of emotional interactions that happen. See, one thing which the best of script can provide, including the making of that script, audio-visual making of that script, is the seamlessness. Only movies do have this property. Not any other form of storytelling have this property. When you read a novel, you can close the book. But when you are you are reading continually and finishing page by page, that actually is effective, but once you pay the ticket into a theater and you stay there, you won't, you can't get out of the theater.
And you can't turn back the page and see if you miss something, you miss something.
Miss something.
Yeah.
So that actually is the property of cinema. So when you have this emotional binding with the audience happen, they look at the cinema and they forget the world which they watch this around them, and they go into this specific world which is strange for them. This actually is the property of every script.
Right.
Has to be the property of every script. So when you say you are outside that, probably there may be some other disturbance which takes you out from watching the entire thing to the inside of what is been intended for. That's what actually would have happened.
I'll tell you two things here. One is, despite being outside, there is something very visceral about, let's say, 5 or 6 scenes in the second half that I actually had goose flesh in Manjummel Boys.
Okay.
So, even though the movie was technically not really working for me, I still had that goose flesh. Would you say that's because of my own mass experience conditioning?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That would have influenced you.
Yeah.
And that's an absolutely totally different thing. That's what I'm saying. When you go into a theater, pay pay for the tickets, you are actually being benevolent to watch what is being shown.
Right.
Every audience is like that.
No, but I think a lot of people are critical about a lot of things.
Absolutely. But at the same time, when you go to a movie house, you yourself is not completely convinced with what you are going to watch.
Yeah.
That doubt is there in you. In the first 10 minutes, you are drawn into it. Then you are immersed into it. So all these are properties of the script, or the making out of that script.
Right.
Is what is intended for. So when you say there are some moments that you could find in Manjummel Boys where you could attach yourself to the characters, then there is something which is embedded in it for you to draw, apart from all the other disturbances that you are
Right.
outside you. So there is somewhere the characterizations work. I would again say these are all individual assessments of the audience, which is beyond the capacities of the writers or the maker.
Right.
They have certain intuitions in which they make that film, and then that's what I told you, if I remember right. I used the word like wildfire. Wildfire is beyond any kind of direction or reason, or it just is a wildfire.
Yeah.
It catches on. But there should be something in that which should rub and create that fire to spread. Without that, the movie won't.
Yeah.
The movie won't work like this. So it has something, but at the same time, and of course, as you said earlier, this song, Kanmani Anbodu, and it starts with some portions of Guna, and it was all animated. It was I think it was a perfect example of something beyond expectation in writing, is what I believe.
Right. Now, I sometimes find myself wondering if I should change the way I look at cinema, because generationally cinema is changing. Now, I come from the generation, and the writers that I've read, the screenplays that I've read, they all placed great emphasis on character development, narrative arcs. So, if something was to happen at this point, I will give you an example from Aadijeevitham. If I'm supposed to feel for this character being separated from the goats and the sheep and the camel or whatever it is that he's caring for, and we spend a good 2 minutes in that scene where he's crying with these goats and saying goodbye to them, there has to be a scene or two earlier which shows us what these creatures mean to him. Now, that is the school that I come from.
True.
And because that is not there, I cannot see this scene in isolation and start crying for it, simply because I don't even know what these goats and things mean to him. Because throughout the movie, you've never shown that connection.
Correct. Correct.
But are we living at a time where the momentary is what matters and not the continuity of it all? Are you getting what I'm saying?
Yes, yes. No, you are absolutely right in what you said. You know, why I say this is in principle, in screenwriting principle, there is something called preparation and aftermath,
Yeah, or setup and payoff.
setup and payoff.
Yeah,
So the setup has to be there if the payoff is intended.
yeah.
Here it is not intended, or it is not supposed to carry that kind of depth of emotional connectivity with the audience and him. Maybe because the writer would want to distance himself from certain things, or probably he wanted to reduce the screen time, or he has priorities of demonstration. So he doesn't do that. And then at the same time, there is one point he wanted to narrate or communicate. He was attached to that. So I don't think, as you suggested, it is not that momentary connectivity that work. It doesn't work. For me, that moment was not connecting well. I was saying that he is getting late for his own escape, is what
That's exactly what I was thinking as well. Yeah.
I got it. So that actually, probably that doesn't help any kind of emotion building at that moment of time. That's what it is. The first point that you said about the preparation and aftermath definitely had to work. Otherwise, the scene doesn't require. It is not required. That's what I feel. That's true. What you said is true. So probably what you are trying to say is, does these principles work, or these principles work while you write? Yes, it works, is what I believe. Why I'm saying it is, human life is not much changed.
Okay.
It won't change in another, I would say, 1,000 years. You may see this Vision Pro, and you may see AI, and you may see so many things, but I think the basic human elements still stand. And I don't think it will have much of an impact. So in that case, when you consider an Aristotelian application of things, it was 2,400 years back.
Yeah, yeah.
And those applications still work. Of course, you can avoid it. That's a different story. When Gaspar Noé does a climax to he reversed the whole process.
Irreversible.
But he still had a reason to do that. It was not just to make the change work for him. No. He had a particular reason to do that. Or when you say La Vie en Rose, they had a particular reason why it was not connected. The events that they show is not connected, because they were actually catching up on the memoir of that person. And memories don't come in a line. So you have those reasons. But what I'm saying is, the emotionality, how do you trigger the audience's emotionality amid a massive crowd? That's the challenge the writer has. When you see it with the hysteric mass, and then you are triggering that emotionality, all the people will cry. How do you do that?
Tell me an instance. This is 3 decades ago, but if you remember, tell me an instance while writing Guna where you aimed for that kind of.
One very abruptly it comes to me is about when Rosie comes to her.
That's the Rekha character. Yeah.
Rekha character comes to him. Rosie, for me, was a platonic projection for away from all that, because he has seen so many men, and she's fed up, and this guy is sympathetic for her, and she is trying to connect. It is like probably the audience would have got another impression about it. It's like when a girl looks at a boy and she smiles. What do you think about that smile? It is always an inviting smile, or let's have some romance kind of face. Maybe she doesn't have any of these. So Rosie's one. The second thing is about when the mother says, "You are making problems for me, Da." And that moment, it is between the mother and the son. And mother was a great influence for him. So it is not just Abhirami, mother also is an influence on him. And his whole idea about this deity or the Shiva kind of a character could have come from how the mother is so worshipful about this Shivalinga. And he grew up on that. And as a little boy, he has even tried with an amicale, he was trying to hurt that man who was trying to get the chain out of her. So the mother and the son character was there. And the last scene, I was literally when she was shot at, and when I was writing it, not at the time of shoot or anything. But there was a sense of defeat in that person, or sense of absolute void in that schizophrenic mind, or that obsessive psychoneurotic mind. That was painful for him. That pain cannot be interpreted by a selfish, human, egotistic mindset. That pain I was trying to define, comparing it with me. There was family, there was friends, there was everything around me, and I found myself an island. So I couldn't distribute my feelings or my emotional bind to anyone who wouldn't recognize it. That made me cry.
While you were writing?
While I was writing. The same thing happened in Chanakyan, my first one. There is a scene, if you remember, this character is a violinist who works in a church choir. And the romance happens when he finds a rose every time in his violin box. And he doesn't know who puts this. And that was a great hope for him. And okay, all those blah blahs. And then he lost everything. He lost this girl, he lost his family. And he becomes a burden for himself. And then the music turned to another tone, which he calls himself revenge. So now he has another music, which is revenge. So he goes. And then Jairam's Sitara, he wanted to make that love possible. So he goes to Sitara's house to get her out of that house and to convince him that Jairam will be waiting there. He's going there as a messenger.
Yeah.
There he sees a rosebud. There is a scene where he looks at this rosebud and his eyes well up. I was absolutely emotional when I was writing it. And the same eyes welling up at Kamal sir's performance made me cry at the set. It is not because I was overwhelmed with the kind of setting that was happening. I was actually affected by that. It was not my story. It was not that anything happened to me. It was just a story. But I could imagine this
Because
person.
you are so into it, right?
Yes.
So it is your story in a way.
Yes,
Yeah.
I literally, my eyes were welled up. So what I say is, sometimes when you go deeper and deeper into the character and you write about it, you are blocked as a writer. You are blocked. You are blocked because you realize your hands are not as fast as your thought.
Yeah.
And you cannot write it at the same speed. And this is what I want to write, and after some time I may not get it at all. Yeah. This kind of uncertainties actually trouble you and stalk you, and this is what it is.
Yeah.
So you cannot speak. This is what I love this conversation, Baradwaj. And we need to have this conversation to the aspiring writer too, because they also may be going for that.
Yeah. And cinema is so complex. And I was actually thinking of when you were talking about the Rosie Rekha character, there is this extraordinary song, Unnai Nanariven. It's like
Varum,
goose-flesh
varum,
song,
varum,
right?
varum,
Yeah,
varum.
yeah. It's just so amazing. And there is a lovely line in that where she sings, where she says, Niyo Vanam Vittu Mannil Vanda Taragai. Nano Yarum Vandu Tangicellum Maligai. You're this wonderful piece of broken star that's fallen on earth.
Yes.
I'm this place where everybody comes and lives for a little bit and goes away, So that very contradiction that she feels, though at some point she does seem to say, I want you, I want to be with you, I'll take care of you and all that, she's aware of the difference between them, and the lyric and the music at that point do their own bit of storytelling.
Yes.
Apart, which is something that you may not even have.
There is a parallel to it. I didn't have that kind of impact with this scenario. Rosie coming to him and looking at the way he sleeps, and he is just after the pentothal, he's tired and his tongue is thick. All those are there. Even the pentothal scene. And these are all written, and that was all written with a lot of fervor and realization about that character.
Yeah.
Same thing, it is not my Madhumuttam's script in Manichitrathalu. There is a song. Baradwaj, I loved that song. You know, it is about the Mambaram. It is about Pukama Pungam. There is a mango tree in front of my house which has never flowered. And at one point of time, it flowered. And I was so full of hopes. And this summer it's going to have bear fruits. And then I was wandering around the backyard of my house, and I could hear the door opens. You know, there is a padipura there. Padipura means the gateway kind of a thing. And then she realizes that somebody has come for her, and she was waiting and waiting and waiting. And she runs up to meet this guy or someone who has come to see her. And then you realize she's going back, found it to be a wrong address. This is the lyric. And in the context, the character is reading that book and she's actually getting those dreamy, hallucinogenic kind of a picture, memories and kind of thing. This was there in the movie, and this was actually a poem written by Madhumuttam. I just bow my head to that genius who has written that story. I mean, and even the lyric. So after all this, probably before this writing, I mean, after some time when I was alone at home and I was also going through some bad patch of things, I think there was that small tape recorder is there where you can put in a cassette and you can hear it. That was a fascinating thing for me. And before going to sleep, I was hearing this song. Baradwaj, I don't know the reason. I just started breaking into sobs and I couldn't control myself where this song was. I was hearing that song. It was a very special experience for me. I could run the whole thing into my own life and say that, well, it could have been like this. And every word that was written had meanings for me.
Yeah.
This actually is the magic and mesmerism of cinema and the music that it carries. So we should be responsibly doing it is what I'm trying to say. And probably when you make marks of responsibility and designs of responsibility, maybe it won't work. And I think it all comes from, as I said earlier, it comes from our baggage. It comes from our agony. It comes from the follies that you consider which you never want to repeat. All this will make you write certain things which will have great value out there, and you may not know how valuable it is to you on this paper.
Which is why I think everybody says in order to write a good screenplay, you have to have lived life first.
Absolutely, Baradwaj.
You can't just have a very sheltered, very protected thing and
it's all about life. We are writing pictures of life. And you are trying to get, that's what I'm saying. I come back to that point again. In Aristotelian era, why there were only tragedies? Comedies were prohibited. You can't write a comedy. So it's only tragedies. And people come to this flock, the stage, the theater, and they cry.
oh wow.
They see whatever has happened in their life, they see on the stage, and they cry at themselves and they cleanse.
So it's a ritualistic.
Yes.
It's like almost like therapy.
Therapy, yes. Yeah. And you cry, you cleanse yourself, your emotions. And so Aristotle called it the emotional cleansing. That was what happening. And the entire principles he wrote in poetic portrayals, the principles of stories came from here. So I think my mentor, I haven't seen him, MT Vasudevan sir. I have taken him to be my mentor, but I haven't seen him. So in one of his stories is Oru Pirannal Sammanam, which was written in the 50s. That was like a slap on your face, that the mother gets a slap on his face. That's the end of that. So a boy wanted to have this payasam for his birthday. And the Ammavan's son, the uncle's son, during his birthday got a payasam. So this boy also tells his mother, Amma, when my birthday comes, you get me some payasam. So on that birthday, when he was coming from, dipping himself from the pond, he was walking by and he could hear a conversation between the uncle and his mother. So she was saying that my son also is like your son, and she likes to have a pie. No, you're actually over ambitious about things. And now you have to do this. It is my son. And then the boy hears a slapping sound. And when he crosses, as if he hasn't heard anything, he crosses, and then the mother comes up, and all he could see was a reddish scar on the mother's face. And that was his birthday gift. That was the story. It was a short story. So MT sir, at some point when he was speaking, he says that great stories come from agony, not from happiness. So sometimes I think that writers shouldn't be given 5-star hotels to write scripts. They'll have a drink and go to sleep. They should be given summer heat and they should be sweating, and then things will come up.
All you writers, aspiring writers out there.
We should go through this agony and uncertainties, and I need to write this and finish it, or else my kids won't have food. All these will trigger you to write better things. I've gone through all that.
But at the end of the day, when you see one of these mass movies, right, which is all about a star and delivering sensation after sensation after sensation without necessarily having any connective tissue,
Correct.
those things, they are very successful, but they also violate every screenwriting principle that we know. How do you look at that as a screenwriter?
No, I look at it as a product which works, which I respect. I don't deny that.
Right. No, and very importantly, these movies are very important because they bring money into the industry, so that the other movies can get made.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. But I realize these movies, for example, KGF, for example, I'm saying, KGF has highly exaggerated dramaturgy working. It is exaggerated. So the drama is in a different form altogether. I would say it is at the peak of things. So when the mother says, at any cost you make money, you be rich. There is it's a statement, or it is the want of a mother out of her own dire conditions, which prompts her to do certain things, which represents a larger mass audience.
Yeah.
To make that money, which is slipping from them.
Yeah.
And it is being handled by the powerful, and they are the oppressed, they are the underdogs. So that actually is a highly universal aspect which is highly exaggerated. So here, when we use this word exaggeration, we should understand one thing, what I realize, what works with these kind of movies. They exaggerate it to the peak with sound, music, all the other spectacular things that they work. But the crux of the scene remains highly hooking and universal. So I believe every cinema is an exaggeration. If you are telling a story through cinema, it is an exaggeration. It is embedded in it, for the sheer reason that it is the lens that portrays us. You cannot see my eyes alone when we are in real terms, but camera can see my eyes alone. So this actually is the exaggeration. So you can highlight it to any extent, and these people highlight it to the maximum, probably 90% up, and with all the sounds that it is thrust into an audience, and they also see that it's a universal element that is portrayed in these scenes or in this sequence, and they work it out that way. So that actually gives an absolute engagement without, I deny the fact, or I don't disagree that these movies don't have any material. It does have material.
No, I would actually, because, sorry to interrupt, but I think KGF is actually a well done example of a mass slash masala movie? Because for me, the director is very influenced by the Salim Javed scripts of the 70s.
Yes.
And it's the antithesis of a diva essentially, because there the mother rejects the son who got his wealth through illegal means.
Correct.
Because the whole point of that is the son who is on the side of the law says mere paas maa hai.
Correct.
Whereas here, the mother herself tells the son that I don't give a shit how you become wealthy because nobody gives a shit.
Do that.
Get money.
And that actually gives a great contrast.
Yeah.
That's a great contrast. You don't expect the mother to say that.
You don't
but
expect,
this
because the
says-
mother in Indian cinema has traditionally been such a virtuous. I'm not saying this mother is evil or something. Obviously, because of her own lack of
context actually-
context is, yeah. So, but this is probably what a mother would say.
Yes.
You know, in real life, she'd say, "Screw morality. You know, just get a good life." It's very easy to say, "Wow, I want to, you know, obey everything and you know lead a very normal life," and that also speaks from a different
Yes. So that actually is a commercial material, commercial in the sense mass viewing material. For example, I tell you, see, when you write, a novelist to write a story, for example, where do you keep it? You keep him inside a room or where he goes to a quiet corner where his so-called instincts are engrossed into it and blah, blah. But this guy writes at the median of a busy road. He's sitting there and writing. This is high contrast.
Yeah.
That actually gives you a lot of questions. And the mother telling this boy to make money, that actually answers so many questions. And that also gives her a backdrop of why she has to say this.
Yeah.
So it actually is a story material
Yeah.
when you get the right contrast into it. So in these movies, you can see this contrast. And that's actually very well thought of.
It's a very good through line.
Through line, yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely.
In recent times, in Indian cinema, what would you say are some of the screenplays that have made you say, okay, I respect this writer?
There are some, I'm not good at remembering names, that's the problem. A burned man becomes a lawyer and
Shahid,
Shahir.
where he is accused of terrorism himself,
Absolutely.
and
Absolutely.
and then later he goes on to become a lawyer.
A lawyer. This actually affected me, really.
Okay.
I was actually taken over by that. That's one movie. Then I love this Kumpalangi Nights. For me, Kadal is an ever-time great script.
Balaji Shaktiwals.
Balaji Shaktiwals. Kadal is an ever-time great film for me. And it was again a movie that made me cry in the end. I was actually into the film all the time.
Yeah.
I was never.
Sometimes I'll just watch an older movie just to see if I still like a movie after a particular time period has passed, right? You kind of, I loved that movie when it was released, but I like I don't know what I feel about it now. One, because filmmaking itself has changed and something that was considered very cutting edge at one point may not be so today. And many of that type of movie may have been made, so the original may seem a little blunted or dimmed today. The second thing is I myself have changed as a person and evolved, whether to the better or whether to the worse, I don't know. But over time, everybody changes and evolves.
I've seen so many movies.
So much, and also not just movies, but also so much of more of life you've seen. So the thing is, so I like to pick these older films and see, right? Kadal was like I felt like it transported me back to that first viewing. It hadn't aged at all. Another movie that did that to me was Subramaniapuram.
Yes, of course, yes.
I just did not feel that it had aged. Every character was so superb and so maybe one or two things here and there, but those are very minor things, you know. But the majority of the stuff, it just
Baradwaj, you remember Kagas Ke Phool.
yeah.
I still take, I'm not exaggerating, I still take a thick towel to soak my tears. And I would have seen it about 50 plus times.
Yeah.
Still, it takes me to an aura of a world which I can understand, and I consider that, well, it could be my life too in a way. Maybe I wouldn't have tripped into that. but I was on the edge of somewhere. And so it actually takes you. So, as you rightly said earlier, when the audience can identify, like the emotional cleansing we were talking about, when the audience can identify some of those to yourself or anticipate, oh my God, if it happened to me, what could be it?
Yeah.
So this kind of things actually take you to that perennial engagement. Whenever you see it, you are engaged to it. There is no time bars.
Yeah, because I think there are certain emotions, if done well, they are like you don't have to be a resident of Madurai or be part of that kind of violent culture that they show in Subramaniapuram in order to identify that, simply because you identify with the friendships, the romantic relationships, everything else, the parents, the this and that, everything else is so thing that this becomes an additional dimension that takes you into the movie, that brings you in, which is why I always against those who say that no, you grew up in the city so you can't really understand this or something like that, because my logic is always I'm able to understand, I mean, like appreciate movies from, I don't know, like other parts of the world where I have not been at all. So if done well, why would I not connect to
Absolutely, absolutely.
stories? I saw Amour, Michael Haneke's film, and I was very surprised Michael Haneke made that movie of all people, because
Yes.
these movies are usually a very
Yes.
different kind of movie. It's also about people in their 90s and 80s. So you would technically, if that law was to be or rule was to be applied, only if you reach that particular age, or only if you have a spouse of that age and you're caring for them or something like that, will you really identify with it. But I was very moved by that movie, and I think it's just how you are able to connect with the emotional resources that you have, which is why I feel that sometimes it's good if screenplays do not tell you everything. Do you agree with that? That sometimes if a
I
screenplay
do.
tells you everything and connects all the dots, then sometimes you don't have much to.
See, Baradwaj, what I look forward is I have this probably the major support system that I believe is no questions unanswered for the audience. Why I'm telling you is the major questions. Suppose if it's a through line and the through line demands certain questions and you cannot play with that doubt from the initial stages of your storytelling to a certain level, certain point of screen time. Why? Because this will be at this question will linger at the back of their mindset while they are watching, which actually disturbs the seamlessness. So, through line, major questions need to be answered. But at the same time, we have this great resource of the subtext. This resource of the subtext actually is far better in the straight narrative. And the subtext will give you a lot of emotional backup to it. We should value it well and match it well. Sometimes in certain stories, the subtext will have more bearing than the through line.
Yeah.
The through line. So this had to be balanced. And I would say subtexts are a great tool. And the roundedness comes from the actions. And suppose if you say that everything is spoon fed about a character, there are principles which say that it can be hinted, like in Thelma and Louise. It is Louise's Texas influence, or whatever be the influence, is never spoken in that script. But we get a feel that she would have committed something there. And she has this undue attachment to that place, probably because of fear or some kind of a sentiment, which she's done it. Already it is hinted well.
Yeah.
So this kind of a hinting, which gives a cerebral exercise for the audience to gather things for themselves, which plays something like an interactive mode,
Yeah.
which we play in games
Yeah.
these days.
And I don't know if I will call it cerebral, because that makes it sound like intellectual. I would say it allows
No,
you
I'm
to.
not talking in intellectual terms.
Yeah, I'm talking about like more like coloring in the gaps.
It is like a puzzle
Yeah,
which we solve.
filling up the blanks.
Filling
Yeah,
up.
yeah, because it's again to come back to you. I look at you and I think you even if you don't tell me I hold this degree from this university and this and that, But I look at you and the way you sit and the way you talk, and I assume that you're well educated, you're that kind of stuff. So that I'm saying that I'm allowed to do that simply by observing your
Absolutely.
action, as opposed to you telling me that, hey, you know what, by the way, I got this degree in whatever, something like that. You don't need to do that. It's as simple as that.
Life is your greatest teacher, right?
Yeah. And which is the best movie about life that you've seen?
I was wondering about it. Sometimes I have to say this movie. This is again an Italian film, and not Indian film. I hate to watch.
This is so freakish. I was thinking of an Italian film as well, but you tell me yours.
La Gran Bellissimo,
Ah, The Great Beauty.
The Great Beauty. I love that film in terms of the world and the characters that the world carries with that. Because the novelist actually wants to make another novel and is looking for some kind of a muse or what will trigger him to do that. And he is actually portraying a whole percept or the perspective of Rome as a world. This is one of the, I would say, it influenced me a lot about how he caricatures the kind of human beings and certain pockets of. There is a mansion he goes into. It's a big mansion.
Yeah.
And he says this is full of photographs, and it's real. So you start from the day one of a baby, just born, and then it grows and grows. It goes upstairs, and then again it grows. He doesn't speak anything about it, but we get a feel that as we grow up, we look like villains.
Yeah.
Or we look like the kind of expressions that this man carries right at the moment is something like he's fed up of things.
Yeah.
He's desperate. He's negative.
Yeah.
All this is communicated through this journey. So I am not very keen on seeing very intellectual kind of films or art house films. I'm not very keen on that. But this has actually influenced me. So many people didn't like that film, as I suggest this film to them. But for me, this was a great impact of how he has managed so many characters within a short screen time, or let us say about an hour and 30 minutes or something like that. That was one great effort that he has made, and which was very impressive for me.
Yeah.
Then I saw another film which was done by one of my students from Mumbai. He showed a film about a maid who comes to work during the pandemic times. And the landlady, the owner of that, the lady of that house doesn't like her. And her daughter is out there in the US. So she's actually coordinating over phone, and her husband is sick.
Oh.
And they have a feel that it can grow into something bad. So she needs some kind of a help, and she has to resort to this lady. And she has her own family.
This film has been released.
No, it's a short film. It's
short
not a feature flick. It's a short film. He has created kind of an aura about the necessities of two people who hated or disliked each other. And when the pandemic, they had to resort to the new conditions. And the lady out there is busy with the telephones. And when this maid's boy wanted to connect with her because his sister is actually coughing.
Yeah.
He couldn't connect with her mother. It's very well plotted. It's very well said. Within about 12 to 13 minutes or 15 minutes, he has made the character so beautifully well. The name of the movie is Together. I'll send you that link. Just watch it. It's a very simply narrated thing, but at the same time, it carries a lot of subtextual things. And they finally realize that the father is getting sick more and more, and they wanted an oxygen cylinder to support him. And suddenly the ambulance comes, and then the son comes to beg her to come back because her sister is coughing a lot and she's sick now. And the other woman doesn't have time to bother about that other necessity. And she also thinks that staying here is a waste of time, and she has to go. So he carries this slightly grown-up boy and runs to the house. And the lady can see that she is running. Then she realizes that she has forgotten all about her. And the man is taken alone to a hospital. Nobody can be a bystander there. It touched me like anything. And then this woman is looking down out of the window and suddenly realizes this oxygen cylinder is material for her now.
Yeah.
So she just tries it all by herself. She is taking it down to walk towards his mate's house where it can be of use to that girl. This is the end.
Yeah.
So it is very touchy. It is so very simple, but it takes you over.
Yeah.
Takes you over. Yeah. So I mean to say that there is even another script which is made, which is also so very touching for me. When I saw the script, it had stains of grease on the paper. It looked very dirty script. Dirty in the sense it was all greasy. And then I asked him, why is it script like this? He said that I never had a space. My friend gave me a little corner in his workshop. And he was actually sitting on a stool and writing this.
It goes back to an older point about screenwriters not being put up in hotels.
The comfort zones. But it actually made me cry reading that script. And it was again some feat that I was going through, how this boy could put in his heart into this writing and how well he has narrated it. So whether it is produced or not is a different thing. That's where Baradwaj, I think there should be an initiative somewhere. I don't know, probably. Yeah. We should find these kind of great efforts and probably give respect to them. Yeah. I'm trying my wholehearted efforts into it. I would like just to identify good screenplays, rounded characters, and it's not a question of how much money is put into it. The way they have written is within their confines of their lives. So it doesn't make any big investment into it, but it can emote well. So probably there should be some space. We'll discuss sometime later.
Yeah. I think we should make this a monthly program.
Yes, we should.
Yeah.
We should.
But just to say, there are two films that I want to name as films that for me are very representative of life. One is I'm cheating. It's actually two films by Fellini, La Dolce Vita and 8.5.
Yes, Dolce Vita.
8.5, because I just love these movies that don't have a strong story, but have just one, like a man has a writer's block. That's all. Or a journalist is looking for a good story. That's all. And then the rest is completely up to the thing. And in these two movies, there is all extremes of life are captured so well, from the absurd to the surreal to the bizarre to the tragic to the comic and all that. Every time I see these films, I'm just like totally, it's like I'm seeing it for the first time, because each time I'm relating to something else compared to what I related to earlier. And the second film is The Godfather Part 2.
Yes.
Because I think it's one of the greatest examples of how a father's sins will revisit the son. And it's one of the greatest examples of cause and effect.
Yes.
Because there are two parallel tracks in the movie. One is the cause and one is the effect. One man is doing everything for survival's sake, like the KGF mother.
Yes.
Who's saying, get whatever money you want, whichever, but it's important to be rich. But her son turns out, just like that, Michael turns out to be very rotten in his desire to protect his father and his family and this and that. I know Godfather Part 1 is more popular.
But 2 has more bearing into...
It's just like it's amazing how wonderful it is, because he's not able to let go of the scene where Fredo's killed. All those scenes are just absolutely spectacular. It's just something magical just happening there. So
see, when you were saying this, between Godfather 1 and 2, or when you consider certain movies which has a guy has a writer's block, for example. See, when you write a script, as I have gone through that experience, when you write a script, what is the direction in which you are going? You need some kind of an impetus to write it. and grow into something and say something. This is what your ambition is, or the writer's prerogative is at that time. So you make a statement which says writer's block comes from a lethargic mind. So you drive towards proving it. So the writer's effort is directed into proving it comes from a lethargic mind. So this is what you mean by the so-called, you call it a theme, but it's not a theme. It's only a thesis which is proven.
Yeah.
Theme cannot be defined correctly well. It's only an experience to the audiences. Probably when you say, every time you see, you get a different experience about it, comes from the original theme.
Yeah.
If you start provoking yourself to finish it by a thesis, which you are trying to prove, love is blind, you put a verb in it, but you are narrating only love. I also tried to prove something, unconditionality, love has to be unconditional. I put a verb into it, it's only a thesis.
Yeah.
But the portrayal of love is absolutely different.
Right.
From people to people. It is, again, I told you as earlier, it is something which is spatio-temporal. The awareness comes from these kind of spatio-temporal things. So there are three ways how people interact or environment interact with society, or how nature interacts with physicality, and what is human system per se. All these are spatio-temporal things which drives you to make an experience of life itself. Once you make that, your movie is unparalleled. Your movie becomes exquisite to portray certain things which has great value for the audiences. So these two things come, you start from a thesis and upgrade yourself to a theme. You cannot come to the theme because it's very difficult to bring it in the first draft. So you need a first draft and then rework on the drafts to make it into a theme, upgrade itself into a theme, where there might be a lot of roundedness or indicatives, or the world is defined well, or the characters or subtext. All these are each rewrite.
But I think a lot of screenwriters, when you look at it, they look at a movie purely through terms of plot or three words, what happens next. What do you think about that?
I think what happens next is an anticipation. That's for their script to be more and more popular. But there is also something called imminence. Every sequence has to have a great anticipation means. It's like defining, you show a great storm coming at the horizon. That's an imminent thing. So that is a very quiet scene. There is no hope out there. But you can anticipate a storm. Sometimes it may happen or may not happen. Then you get into the actual punishing storm itself, which is a great conflict where you will survive or not question arises there. But the previous scene is very silent and less chaotic. So the silent scene itself by itself gives anticipation. So there are two different things to it. But what I'm trying to say is, for a better or a good screenplay, we should have a mix of a little bit of boredom, upgrading to something, or else you won't distinguish what is this continued anticipation. So you need some kind of a distraction to it so that the contrast can be well understood.
Yeah, yeah.
So where you can make a subplot come in,
Right.
or you can make the love maybe a little more humorous, or you can add a Vadivel scene there, or
Yeah.
a humorous scene there, or whatever it is.
Yeah.
So that diversion it's a mix
Yeah.
of many things.
Right. What you mean by boredom is diversion.
Absolutely.
Yeah, yeah.
Boredom is not, that is the greatest enemy of a screenplay.
Yeah, yeah. You just use the word unparalleled. Do you think you have written an unparalleled screen?
No. I don't consider myself that kind of a writer at all. I am striving to make something good, or striving to realize something which I like to do, and I want more people to connect with that. So my worry is how many people will connect with that. And sometimes I get a trigger of something and I pursue it. And I have about 4 or 5 screenplays which is written and I need to pitch it. So I love all those. I wanted to tread into the mindset of a woman who is suddenly feeling lost in this world, in the crowd. She's lost. So I wanted to pursue that. I pursued it. I also want to know about how well is civilization versus an uncivilized world. I wanted to compare, or rather make the distinction why there is a Sentinelese out there who doesn't want civilization to reach up there. And it's about 800 kilometers from here. It is even lesser than going to Kerala from Chennai. But still, there is no civilization. So what makes that crowd and how do they survive, or what makes them more civilized sometimes, perhaps more civilized than the civilized world?
Right.
So I pursue that. Then I realize writing a script is much simpler than pitching it and getting it done. And it's a totally different life by itself.
Yeah.
Baradwaj, I want to do a great script, the so-called great script. I don't know. Maybe I'll do it. I don't know. I'm
But
trying.
why don't you think Guna, for instance, is a great script? Can you give me one example of something that in your mind prevents it from becoming that unparalleled great script?
Guna has its own follies about probably about handling certain situations.
Okay.
Those situations are the constraints of producing it at that time. Within the limits of, we have limits of screen time, we also have limits of money, or we also have limits of manpower and the possibilities and creating a world which is written in the script. All these are limits. I would want perhaps to write another version of Guna sometimes, which is in a totally different angle, and it should stand on its own.
But with the existing Guna, what is, let's say, one thing that you feel you did not do as well as you could? Because
Probably, I think I should have created more rounded an Abhirami
okay.
from the Abhirami's point of view. Abhirami is just a girl who enters. We haven't gone much. We have just, because we don't have the screen time for that. All these are defects of the, you can't use it every. So I think Abhirami also should have a precept, or rather a perspective, which is lesser known. When Guna ties the thali and he goes to sleep, and then that is a point when she realizes he is a special kind of a person. And then it gets reaffirmed when his own manager wants her killed, or she cannot believe or rely on this manager. He is the only person who can be relied absolutely. These are effect of a cause. But I haven't gone deeper into that character somewhere. Unlike I say something about Guna's past or lives or something like that. Probably I couldn't make a contrast between Guna and Roshni's character, Abhirami. That would have helped a lot for them, an impossible couple, and the unconditionality prevail. Maybe I couldn't do that at that time.
I don't know if that is a point that I would agree on, because you do say that she is very rich, she's been neglected, emotionally neglected all her life. So just like Guna's journey is about cleansing himself from all the dirt by marrying an Abhirami, this Abhirami's journey is all about finding that emotional, filling that emotional vacuum in her life. I think that comes through in the film. No? That's
Probably it would have been better.
you're saying it could have been better.
Better.
Okay, all right.
Could have
So
been
it's
better.
like,
Sometimes, I have written this girl as a statue walking, a marble statue walking is what the impression of the texture of her skin and kind of things. And she is that in the movie. Probably and there is lesser room for her to discuss her own plight. And her own distancing from what she wanted to do or what she is now, we are not exposing it much because of the screen time in terms of the what do you call the gangsters entries,
Yeah.
and that is more important. And I would have made it a little lesser on that, but again, it was the requirement of the times
And it's
to.
also you're working in a mainstream medium.
We cannot do all
When
that.
the story is already so eccentric, maybe you have to balance. I'm not justifying it.
Yeah.
I'm just saying these are things you have to take into consideration.
Yes, yes.
But I would say one of the reasons Abhinami did not quite work for me as a character was the actor. I don't know why in Tamil cinema this repeatedly happens that great roles are often given to heroines who cannot perform them, don't know the language, have very, and of course it's not their fault. It's like because they are saying, okay, I'll do my best that I can. But this requires more than just I'll do the best that I can. It requires somebody truly, a match for Kamal, kind of that kind of a thing. I don't know, like even the first time I saw it, that like I remember, okay, this Kamal's like this, and like I wish they'd gotten somebody that, which is why I think Virumandi worked for me so well, because that Abhirami was not only written in a feisty way, but she was also portrayed in a very, I felt she stood up to, like she was finally somebody who could.
See, the cause for finding a new face at that time, if I remember right, is actually she's a living deity. That is one. The second thing is she also cannot immediately taken for granted that she is this. So there is a lot of uncertain, or rather mysteries about that girl. So that was there. And choosing her also was, we went there one day and started seeing girls, and then finally at the brim of time when we were supposed to come back, she came in. And so that was the thing. But I think, anyway, I would say there should be another angle to Guna. Of course, I might want to do or look into it.
Yeah, but thank you for being so patient and talking about this,
No, it
because
was a great time. I love talking like this, and I think you also have triggered so many things into it. So
but yeah, I really hope you get that sequel to Guna made.
yeah, well,
It's
I think so. I think so.
yeah, I think I would love to see the part. It's just mentioned briefly in the movie where he just says it, where he was tied in chains and left at a temple whenever he got into that animal state. But we never see that younger Guna. So that might be something interesting. But yeah, I'm not trying to dictate the thing, but I'm just saying, sometimes I wish all movies were miniseries, because I want to
Yeah.
know so much. If I like a movie, I don't have to like it 100%, but even if I like a movie like pretty well, I want to know what is this person, what is their backstory, what happened then, what happened this, what happened that. When he says that one line about, they tied me to this in this temple and left me there for 3 days or something like that. I'm like, what must have been like for that boy? Like, what did he experience? Is that why he's so unafraid of the forest? Is it like because he's been there so many times? Those you just
No,
wanna.
that area, of course, we should describe a world of these hallucinogenic minds. They may have a world which is away from the normal world. This is again compared to one of the movies that I wrote called Surya Manasam, where Mammootty, that was actually based on Of Mice and Men, the short story. There again, there is a world for this guy, where he has a lot of rabbits going around and he wants to just pat on this rabbit skin, and as he pats, it is so strong, the patting goes and the rabbit dies. That's what he is. So again, this guy has a world or a fantasy. Oh, if had I been there, nobody would disturb me. We all have that fantasy at a very, within us we have that. Oh, I would like to. Maybe I want an easy chair where I can relax and sit there looking into the sky and seeing what all happens around me. These are all little fantasies that we have, which we may not enjoy too many times. But certain characters may have this. Even maybe I am prone to do that because I realized we all have this inner cubicle which demands certain things which we don't get.
Yeah.
We don't get in life. And we try to replace it with something else. So the characters should have that, and then more people can identify it. We all have that. We all go through that.
Yeah, and which is one of the reasons I think we also go to the movies to sometimes get the closure we don't get in life.
Absolutely, absolutely. You are right. Absolutely right. That's one thing which draws us to stories, not even movies. Stories gives us closure. Stories gives us a definition, and we are taken away from this great uncertainty. What will happen tomorrow? So movies give you that. Within a context, it gives answers, a result, for sure. But you don't know about it. So I always say that we have these great insurance policies we take 15 years from now. And we don't know whether tomorrow is a day for us. Still, we keep on buying these insurance policies.
But there's your hope and fear, which we started about, right?
Absolutely.
So that's a great note to end this conversation on. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Baradwaj. I enjoyed this.
I love
Thank
this.
you very
Thank you so much. Yeah.
GT Holidays, South India's #1 travel brand.
GUVI, a vernacular edutech brand, skilling everyone everywhere.